in order to truly understand. First, we must go back to the beginning.
Storyboard! It begins with a storyboard. So as you can see here, this was the original planning out for the idea, and it's more or less stayed the same, except for maybe thematic changes, perhaps. Funnily enough, looking back on it seems funny to look back on it this way now, but originally I did genuinely grapple with whether or not to go straight up horror. But then I lent more into the good old Monty Python rabbit scene. And then things developed from there into how it is now as I was adding certain effects. So with the storyboard now providing me with, a pretty solid blueprint, I'm then able to go straight ahead and start filming, and it's the perfect time to utilize my God-given acting abilities. I basically ended up doing the whole David Fincher thing where I went overboard, and as you can see I've got about 8 minutes of takes, even though the end result's about 20 seconds, but really this was sort of a learning experience, creative process thing in itself, sort of sketching out how things would look. Like for this impact bit here, originally I wanted someone to throw the bird at my head for a natural reaction, but I realised it looked too slow, so I needed to use effects to give the bird sort of terminal velocity. Here's the back plate that I recorded, so this is clean plate I should say, used so that the bird has something to float on. So this was the chroma key green screen that I put together. So originally I tried filming from the same perspective as where the character myself would have been standing, and that it looked stupid, but it was a good learning experience because it just wound up looking like puppeteering in the end. So it was a much better idea to do this, where I actually get up close to capture more detail. I sort of, as you can see, I've got a green glove there, and I basically have to perform the bird's movements. So here I wanted to get, tail movement as it's flying through the air, and that was important there because I knew there was going to be sort of a whiplash effect if the bird's impacting when it hits. And yeah, I got a few jiggles in the last shot, the last chroma key shot, because that's as the bird flies up and then his nose will sort of tilt down and he focuses on his target as he's about to go in for the attack. Now we're getting right into the meat and potatoes of the operation. So this is the first of the effects shots really. So we could see the chroma key in the last shot, so I had to key that out using the Keylight plugin. Then it was a matter of using some masking to get a really nice tight border around the bird. But as you can see here, there was a real stark difference in the bird and the clean plate. So that was just a matter of attaching some coloring, brightness and contrast effects to the layer to make it a bit more of a uniform composition, really. Then, of course, we have the big one, where most of the effort went in. So we've got a lot of masking that goes on here. As you can see, I had to create sort of a depth illusion by masking out the coat rack to make it seem like the bird is actually, flying through the corridor here instead of coming out of, the wrong angle. The motion blur is obviously key. It's really handy that you can essentially just tick a box and have it going. Got the chroma key obviously in the masking, which was just using the same technique as before, and then I used some brightness and contrast, same as before, to blend it in. A little bit of shadowing was added later, which in hindsight, so a lot of the stuff is carried over from the last shot, with the addition of some more masking and even a little bit of rotoscoping actually, because I had to make sure that the bird actually looked like, I turned my body here and it had to look like it was hitting my neck, so it took a little bit of rotoscoping to get that right. Rotoscoping the mask to cut part of the bird out. The blood, as you can see, had a very humble beginning. The whole thing is just a particle system. I didn't want to use third party because I'm an idiot and stubborn. Anyway, it wound up looking good in the end. But yeah, I had a bunch of particle systems. I pre-comped them into their own thing for the sake of simplicity, as you can see here. So the particle systems are attached to a solid layer with then adjustments to create sort of a blur effect. One of the particle systems from the tutorial that I followed was like a jet outwards, and I wasn't into that. I like sort of the spray that I have, and then I used a still image to make it look like it was stuck to the screen. And yeah, working with all this sort of gore, I think it was about this time that I realised it has to be Angry Birds by Quentin Tarantino. It just had that vibe. The colouring is really subtle stuff. It's just sort of temperature and a handful of shadow adjustments, I think. So I was pretty, once I realized I was kind of copying Tarantino, I thought, well, he doesn't, like, sometimes he goes heavily on temperature, but not always. So I wanted to keep it all relatively neutral in the end. So for the audio, I basically worked in Logic Pro. I imported the movie over to there, set up some tracks for all the sound effects that I wanted to create. They're all just stuff that I made around the house that I thought would make a good fit. Everything from the floating to the attacks to the whooshes. This is probably where I would say where things started to deviate the most, because as you can see here, originally I was going for the Hans Zimmer thing, the horn, that one that's used in basically every movie trailer that you've ever heard.
What's the most
Yeah, that. So that didn't really fit with the new sort of minimalist approach. Like Tarantino, he's known for music, but in his movies you sort of notice a lot of the, sudden violence or action scenes. They'll often be quite, I don't know that he uses music a lot for action scenes. It usually lets the action itself do the talking. So I sort of compromised a bit, and I knew I needed to have some sort of music cue, but yeah, I let the blah slide in favor of some drums. The real Tarantino trademark that I knew I had to have was his signature, the zooms that he does. So I had to find a way to sneak one of those in. The hardest part was really just the couple of hours I spent trying to get the woof sound effect right.
You will?
Yeah, so then the hiss of the attack as the bird sort of flies through the air, that was sort of me just being a fastidious wannabe sound designer. That's just sort of layering in some. I think it was just me opening like a bottle of Pepsi or something just to layer something else in. And then I guess finally the actual gore of the attack. That's just me eating some vegetables. I think I was just cramming as much celery and carrot into my mouth whilst trying to chew it. So yeah, anyway, I think that really wraps things up. This has probably gone on way too long, so thanks anyway for watching, I guess.